He didn't come to draw attention. He sat quietly, back row, watching with eyes that had seen too much and a heart shaped by injustice. But when a heated exchange broke out and a young officer told him to leave, no one realized they were confronting a man who had once changed national policy with just a single sentence. What happens when power doesn't shout, but simply shows up? If this story touches you, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. Now, let's step into a story that proves sometimes the quietest man carries the loudest truth. And that morning, the courtroom had no idea. It was about to become part of history. It was the kind of morning that held its breath. The courthouse in Greenwood County, Alabama, stood quiet under a pale sky, its old stone steps still wet with dew. Inside, security buzzed low, routine and indifferent. No one expected anything remarkable that day. No protests, no press, just another docket full of cases waiting for judgment. Through the side entrance, not the grand front doors, a man entered, unnoticed. Isaiah Cole walked with the posture of someone who had spent decades in discipline, but with a softness that came only with age. 66, tall, black, neatly dressed in a faded gray shirt and slacks. He looked like someone's grandfather, not someone who had once commanded entire brigades across continents. The leather briefcase in his hand bore the creases of time, its corners scuffed, its weight more symbolic than practical. He said nothing as he walked past a group of attorneys joking by the elevators. No one greeted him. He didn't expect them to. Isaiah wasn't there for himself. He had come for someone else, a young former soldier named Malik, on trial that morning for allegedly assaulting a police officer during a traffic stop. But Isaiah knew Malik. The boy had served under his command, and he knew the system. He knew how quickly a narrative could shift when a black man in uniform took it off. He could have called ahead, could have had a liaison clear his way, announce his presence, prepare the court, but Isaiah chose not to. Today, he came not as a general, not as a symbol, just as a man. Outside courtroom C, he found an old wooden bench and sat, briefcase on his lap, hands folded. Inside the case were carefully organized documents, service records, commendations, sworn statements, and one handwritten letter on Department of Defense letterhead, addressed to the court. Everything was in order. He glanced around the hallway. People were rushing, typing on phones, whispering legal strategies, but no one noticed him. Not the bailiff walking past, not the young public defender pacing in heels too tight, not even the clerk pushing a cart full of files. And Isaiah preferred it that way. There was clarity and invisibility. From that silence, he could observe. He checked his phone. One new message from Malik's defense attorney. You're confirmed as our primary character witness. Please submit all documents to the clerk's desk before entry. He exhaled slowly, stood up, and walked toward the far end of the hallway where the legal submission window was located. Signs were confusing, labels unclear, but Isaiah didn't mind the detour. He had spent his life navigating hostile terrain. He didn't know it yet, but his quiet steps were about to ignite a storm, not because of what he did, but because of what others assumed he was. The man who entered unnoticed was about to become the center of a moment that would challenge an entire system. Isaiah Cole was halfway down the corridor, his steps unhurried, his mind calm, when he paused at a faded brass sign barely visible under the courthouse's flickering fluorescent light. It read staff only, authorized personnel beyond this point, but the submission window sat just beyond that threshold, separated only by a line on the floor. No barrier, no guard. He stepped forward, unaware that those few inches were about to change everything. From the far end of the hallway, Officer Rachel Whitmore spotted him immediately. She had been transferred just a few months earlier from a larger precinct-sharp uniform, neatly tied blonde hair, and a posture that always screamed vigilance. Rachel was known for her tight-ship mentality. She followed rules like scripture and didn't trust anyone who didn't look the part. That morning, her nerves were already taut. Rumors swirled around this trial. A black veteran on trial for attacking law enforcement. She didn't want surprises, and Isaiah Cole didn't look like someone who belonged. She stepped forward fast, boots clicking on tile, one hand resting on her belt just beside her holster. "Sir," she called firmly, blocking his path. "This area's restricted. What are you doing back here?" Isaiah turned to face her, his voice calm, composed. "Good morning. Officer, I'm just here to submit documents for Case 11C. The defense attorney instructed me to bring these to the clerk's window." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "You're not staff. Did you not see the sign?" Isaiah offered a faint smile. "The signs are difficult to follow in this building. My apologies. No harm intended." "Do you have ID?" she asked sharply. "I do," he replied, reaching slowly for the zipper of his briefcase. But that movement was enough. Rachel's voice rose, clipped and loud. "Keep your hands visible." Isaiah froze mid-motion, eyes still kind but resolute. "I understand. I served 30 years. I know protocol." "You served," she scoffed. "In what security? That doesn't mean you have clearance." He looked at her, still no anger, no heat. "I'm a witness today. That's all. Just a man helping another." But Rachel wasn't listening. Her attention had already shifted from reason to suspicion. "I need you to step away from the bag," she ordered. "Now." There were a few murmurs down the hallway. A couple of people glanced up from their seats, unsure whether to intervene, but like most public places, silence became safety. Isaiah slowly raised his hands. "There is nothing dangerous in here, just documents and records." "You're refusing to follow commands," Rachel snapped. "Turn around, hands behind your back." "I'm cooperating," he said, his voice softer now. "But I want you to understand, you are making a mistake. Turn around." And Isaiah did. Not in fear, not in surrender, but with the grace of someone who had stood in more dangerous places than this, in front of people more powerful than her. She gripped his wrist roughly, the handcuffs clicking into place, metal against flesh. Louder than they needed to be, more symbolic than secure. To onlookers, it looked like just another arrest. An old black man in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Easy to justify, easy to forget, but this wasn't just another man. The clerk behind the glass window froze for a moment before sliding the pane shut. A bailiff near the door shifted awkwardly and turned away. Not one person spoke. Not one person asked why. Silence, once again, chose its side. Rachel pressed her shoulder radio. Officer Whitmore requesting backup. Potential non-compliant male. Hallway 3B. Unverified ID. Subject acting evasive. Isaiah stood motionless. wrists behind his back, chin lifted. "I am not resisting," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But you will regret this." She chuckled under her breath. "Yeah, who exactly are you?" His response was measured. "I'd like to make a phone call." "Sure, want me to call the White House for you too?" Isaiah turned slightly, enough for her to hear him without raising his voice. "No need. The Pentagon will do." Rachel laughed. Too loud. "You people," she muttered, "always pretending to be something you're not." Still cuffed, Isaiah said nothing. Instead, he turned his head and gave a slight nod toward his briefcase. "There's a phone in there. Government issued. Starred contact. Just dial it." Rachel rolled her eyes, opened the briefcase, and retrieved a sleek black phone mat, unbranded, with a security lock. It was cold in her hand, heavier than expected. Something about it felt real. She swiped the screen. A list of starred contacts appeared. The top one read Madge, Eliza Morales, Joint Operations Command. She hesitated just for a moment, then tapped. It rang once, twice. Then a voice picked up. "This is Major General Morales." "Who is this?" Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. Isaiah finally spoke. "General Cole, unlawfully detained, Greenwood County Courthouse, civilian authority unaware of identification." The silence was instant. Then, "Are you secure, sir? For now, we are dispatching federal verification. DHS has been alerted. Stay on the line. Extraction team mobilizing." Rachel's face drained of color. Still holding the phone, she stepped back. I didn't know," she stammered. Isaiah didn't look at her. He didn't need to. Because now, the hallway had changed. People stood up. Phones were lifted, quietly recording. Someone whispered, "I think that is him." The weight of truth was louder than the cuffs around his wrists. And Rachel, who thought she was detaining a nobody, was now just a trembling figure standing in the wrong place, at the wrong moment, facing the truth too late. The hallway outside courtroom C no longer felt like a public space. It felt like a stage. Rachel Whitmore stood frozen, the phone still pressed loosely to her ear, the voice on the other end sharp and unrelenting. The name General Isaiah Cole now rang in her ears with a thunderous weight she hadn't prepared for. "This is Commander Banks, Department of Defense," the voice stated firmly. "We have confirmed location and live coordinates. Response unit is en route. Officer Whitmore, you are to maintain the subject's safety and refrain from further communication. Do you understand?" Rachel's throat tightened. I didn't know who he was," she stammered. "You didn't ask," the voice replied curtly. "Stand by. You're no longer in control." The call ended. Rachel slowly lowered the phone and looked around. A few bystanders were now openly recording. Others whispered in confusion or awe. What had started as a silent misunderstanding had become a full-blown reckoning. Isaiah Cole remained still, handcuffed, calm. His eyes scanned the hallway, not with anger but with a tired familiarity, as if this wasn't the first time he had been judged before being seen, as if history, once again, was repeating itself on cue. Then came the sound that changed everything. Low hums, heavy engines, tires crunching gravel outside the courthouse entrance. The glass doors rattled as three matte black SUVs rolled into position with surgical precision, one blocking the front steps, one sliding into the judge's reserved space, and the last stopping inches from the side lobby. No sirens, no urgency, just control. From the lead vehicle, two men in dark suits stepped out, clean-cut, earpieces glinting. They moved with the kind of confidence that didn't need to be explained. From the second vehicle, a woman in full army dress uniform emerged, colonel bars on her shoulders, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the building like radar. And from the last SUV came the man everyone instinctively stepped aside for. Tall, black, imposing. He wore a crisp military uniform with rows of ribbons across his chest and silver eagles on his collar. Under one arm, he held a leather folder, in the other, the stillness of command. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He walked, measured, precise, unmistakable. The crowd inside parted as he entered the courthouse. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones dropped to silent. Even the receptionist at the front desk slowly stood. His boots echoed like punctuation down the hallway, each step confirming what no one had believed until now. He was real. He was here. He was authority. When he reached the corridor where Isaiah stood, cuffed and unbending, he paused. For a moment, he said nothing. His eyes scanned Isaiah, checking, verifying, acknowledging. Then General Cole, he said, voice even and low. Isaiah nodded. Colonel Maddox, we received your call. Command has confirmed your identification. Homeland Security and the U.S. Marshals are on standby. We'll take it from here. He turned his gaze toward Rachel. Are you the officer who detained him? Rachel stiffened, trying to collect the pieces of authority she had so quickly lost. Yes. He was in a restricted. He held up a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. The gesture wasn't loud, but it was final. That man, he said, pointing calmly to Isaiah, has federal clearance beyond your jurisdiction. You detained a decorated military leader without verifying credentials, and you transmitted that over an unsecured public frequency. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. Each word was like a blade, clean, sharp, undeniable. Until further notice, he continued, you are relieved of supervisory authority in this building. Step back. Rachel hesitated, still frozen in disbelief. Her mouth opened to argue, but no sound followed. Slowly, she took one step back, then another, her face pale, her hands stiff at her sides. The colonel motioned toward a nearby officer. Uncuff him! The younger officer approached hesitantly, as if he were waking from a dream. With a quiet clink, the cuffs fell away from Isaiah's wrists. He didn't flex. He didn't rub the skin. He simply adjusted the cuff of his sleeve and straightened his jacket. Still dignified, still silent, still unshaken. The hallway remained heavy with something unspoken, guilt, awe, and the quiet horror of realizing that injustice had unfolded right in front of them, and no one had intervened. From the courtroom doors, the presiding judge emerged, confusion in his eyes. What is going on here? He asked. Colonel Maddox stepped forward, presenting the leather folder he had carried. Authorization from the Department of Defense, he stated. Verification of identity, formal complaint filed. This is General Isaiah Cole, retired, 3-star general, former Joint Operations Command. The judge's lips parted. His gaze shifted to Isaiah. My God, he muttered. We didn't know. Isaiah finally spoke. You didn't ask. Those three words didn't ring like accusation. They landed like a reckoning. The judge stepped aside, no longer certain of his authority in the room. Colonel Maddox addressed the crowd once more. "This was not just a mistake," he said. "This was a failure of recognition. It happened in a building meant to protect justice, and it will be accounted for." Then, he turned toward Isaiah with something rarely seen in uniform reverence. "General, the floor is yours." Isaiah nodded slightly, then looked around at the faces watching him, some curious, some ashamed, some recording still. He didn't shout. He didn't lecture. Instead, he said, "I didn't come here to be seen as a general. I came here to be seen as a man." There was no applause, only silence. But this time, it wasn't the silence of complicity. It was the silence of reflection, and that made all the difference. The door to courtroom C stood open now, but no one dared move until Isaiah Cole took the first step. He didn't rush. He simply walked with the same quiet authority he had carried through war zones, across briefing rooms, and now into a space where justice had almost failed. The courtroom hushed. Even the rustle of paper stopped, as if the very walls were waiting to listen. Rachel Whitmore stood just outside, no longer in uniform, her badge surrendered, her posture smaller. She didn't follow him in. Inside, the judge returned to his bench, though his gavel remained untouched. The young man on trial, Malik Thompson, sat at the defense table with eyes wide. He hadn't seen Isaiah in over 5 years. Back then, he was just a green recruit, standing rigid while General Cole delivered calm orders before every mission. Today, Malik sat in handcuffs, accused, misunderstood, and nearly alone. But Isaiah's presence changed that. The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, as previously approved, we called General Isaiah Cole to the stand as a character witness." There was no objection. Isaiah walked to the front of the courtroom. No fanfare, no pageantry, just a man with a folder, placing it gently on the witness stand. The clerk swore him in, her voice slightly shaky. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Isaiah met her gaze. "I always have." A few people shifted in their seats. The defense attorney stepped forward. "General Cole, can you tell the court why you are here today?" Isaiah looked at Malik, then out toward the room. "I'm here," he began, "because this young man deserves to be judged not by assumptions, but by truth." His voice was steady, rich with quiet command. "Malik Thompson served under my command for 2 years. He was disciplined, loyal, and level-headed under fire. I trusted him with lives multiple times, and he never failed to act with integrity." The attorney nodded. "And how do you respond to the claim that he attacked a police officer?" Isaiah turned slightly toward the jury box. "I wasn't there, but I know Malik, and I know what happens when fear meets skin color. Sometimes, what people see isn't what stands before them. They see a type, a danger, a threat." He paused just long enough for the words to land. "And when that happens, justice doesn't just falter, it disappears." A deep silence settled over the courtroom. Even the opposing counsel didn't rise to interrupt. Isaiah continued, now slower. "This morning, I was detained, wrongfully. I showed no aggression, made no threats. I walked into this building to submit paperwork, and within minutes, I was in handcuffs." The judge leaned forward slightly, brow furrowed in concern. Isaiah's voice didn't rise, but the gravity in it grew stronger. I didn't tell them who I was, not because I was hiding anything, but because who I am shouldn't require a title to be treated with dignity. He let that truth settle like dust on polished wood. I didn't ask to be seen as a general. I asked to be seen as a man. In the gallery, a young woman, clearly a law student, raised her phone and began to record, hand trembling slightly. She wasn't the only one. From the back row, a father with his daughter clutched her hand tighter. Isaiah looked back toward Malik. We train soldiers to be strong, obedient, and brave. But we don't always train the world to see them that way, especially when they're young, and especially when they're black. Then he turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'm not here to tear down your courtroom. I believe in the law. I've defended it my whole life. But belief without accountability is blindness. And if we don't speak up when assumptions become judgment, we're not protecting justice. We're protecting tradition at the cost of truth. He stepped back. Not with anger, not with pride, just clarity. I rest my testimony. The courtroom didn't clap. They didn't cheer, but they felt it. Even the bailiff who earlier had ignored Isaiah's detention stood a little straighter. Malik's attorney whispered, "Thank you." And Malik, blinking back quiet emotion, mouthed the words, "Sir." I didn't think anyone would come. Isaiah nodded gently. You weren't alone. The trial continued, but something in the air had changed. The prosecutor didn't cross-examine. The judge called a recess. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, not protesters, just ordinary people with phones, questions, and an unshakable feeling that something important had just happened. By sundown, the clip of Isaiah's testimony had gone viral. I didn't ask to be seen as a general. I asked to be seen as a man. That sentence became a headline, a hashtag, a lesson. Civil rights groups reposted it. Military veterans shared it. Schools began playing it in classrooms. Law professors labeled it the most powerful courtroom moment captured on camera in the last decade. Rachel Whitmore's suspension was formalized within 48 hours. But Isaiah didn't gloat. He declined every interview, refused a book deal, said no to primetime TV. He left the courthouse with the same quiet presence he entered with. A week later, he spoke at a closed-door seminar at the Army War College. Standing before young officers on the verge of deployment, no uniform, just a charcoal suit and a presence that silenced the room. You don't wear the uniform to command fear, he said. You wear it so people know they can trust what stands in front of them. Then he added, your rank earns attention. Your conduct earns belief. Some cadets scribbled furiously. Others simply listened, eyes wide, back straight. That was the true impact, not what went viral, not the headlines, but the shift in hearts, in minds, in how people saw and chose to see again. The courthouse steps were bathed in the orange glow of a late southern sunset. Inside, the buzz of legal arguments, objections, and verdicts continued on as usual. But outside, the crowd had shifted from curious murmurs to purposeful stillness. They weren't gathered for a scandal. They weren't waiting for justice to fail. They were there to witness something rare. Dignity walking quietly out of a building that had once denied it. General Isaiah Cole stepped out into the light, the same worn leather briefcase in his hand, the same gray suit pressed and unassuming. He didn't speak to the press. He didn't smile for the cameras. And yet, somehow, every lens found him. No entourage, no military escort. Just a man who had come to tell the truth and left having changed something much bigger. Inside, the courtroom proceedings resumed. Malik Thompson's case wasn't dismissed outright, but with Isaiah's testimony, the prosecution's tone softened. A plea deal was offered, reduced charges, no jail time, mandatory community service. Malik's attorney leaned in with tears in her eyes, whispering, "We did it." Malik looked to the door Isaiah had just exited and whispered, "He did." But Isaiah didn't linger to hear the outcome. He already knew what mattered. By nightfall, the clip of Isaiah's courtroom statement had crossed 1 million views. Within 72 hours, it hit 10 million. The line, "I didn't ask to be seen as a general, I asked to be seen as a man," was printed on posters, quoted in essays, and etched into the public conscience like a quiet revolution. Churches quoted him in sermons. Civil rights groups invoked him in speeches. High school civics teachers asked students what they would have done had they been in that hallway. Watching a man be wrongfully cuffed without a word of protest, the silence of that moment had become its own indictment. A professor at Emory Law School described the footage as the cleanest modern-day demonstration of ethical restraint under systemic bias. Another added, "He didn't burn the system down. He reminded us why it was built." Back in Greenwood County, Officer Rachel Whitmore sat through her disciplinary hearing, no longer in uniform. The Internal Affairs report cited excessive use of authority, failure to verify identification, and gross mishandling of a federal witness. But the most damning entry, neglect of human recognition. Rachel didn't contest the findings. She didn't speak at the press conference afterward. In fact, she didn't say much of anything in the weeks that followed. Not because she didn't have the words, but because she had nothing left to defend. The Department of Justice issued a joint review of all courtroom detainments and security procedures within the state triggered by Isaiah's case. Quietly, training protocols were rewritten. Courthouse officers across 5 counties were required to complete implicit bias training. Isaiah Cole never demanded reform. He simply became the reason it could no longer be ignored. Reporters called his name at every airport terminal. He never stopped to answer. Producers sent offers, documentaries, televised interviews, op-eds with his name on them. He declined them all. When a major news outlet offered him a front-page story, Isaiah sent a handwritten note in return. "I didn't come to be remembered. I came so someone else wouldn't be forgotten." He returned home to a modest house outside Fort Benning, Georgia. No security gates, no portraits on the wall, just books, medals stored in drawers, and a quiet corner where he sat each morning with coffee and a paper, no longer interested in headlines about him. Yet people still came. Young soldiers asked for meetings. Retired veterans brought folded flags and handwritten notes. Once, a mother drove 12 hours just to thank him for showing her son what manhood really looked like. Isaiah always received them with warmth but few words. His message hadn't changed. Your rank doesn't define your voice. Your presence does. 3 months later, Greenwood County High School launched a new civic studies program with a case study titled "The Cole Incident: Ethics, Bias, and Civic Responsibility." The curriculum didn't include his biography. It didn't list his titles. Just a scenario, a hallway, a wrong assumption, a moment of restraint, and a sentence that shifted a nation's reflection on justice. At West Point, his name was added to a leadership seminar called The Power of Presence. Cadets studied not just his words, but his silence. One instructor said, "He's the kind of leader who makes the room quieter, not louder. That's how you know the truth is about to speak." 6 months after the courthouse incident, Isaiah was invited to deliver a private talk to graduating officers. The auditorium was small, the cameras were off. The audience was young, wide-eyed, hopeful, and still figuring out the weight of their future uniforms. Isaiah stood without notes, no screen, no rank, just his voice. "Courage isn't about charging the battlefield," he said. "It's about standing still when every instinct tells you to react." He scanned the room. 100 heads leaned forward. "Some of you will wear stars one day, others may not. But all of you, everyone will walk into rooms where your silence will speak louder than any order. Use it well." There was a pause, a different kind of quiet, not nervousness, but respect. Isaiah stepped back from the podium, not to applause, but to understanding. Years from now, there will be no national monument with his face, no best-selling book, no holiday bearing his name. But in courthouses, classrooms, and quiet offices where people now think twice before assuming, before judging, before turning away, he will still be there. Not in marble, but in memory. Not in speeches, but in choices. Because sometimes the greatest legacy isn't loud. It walks out the back door of a courthouse with its head held high and leaves behind a silence so powerful it echoes for generations. The train rolled gently south through the rolling hills of Georgia, its steel rhythm cutting through quiet fields and forgotten towns. In a near-empty carriage, Isaiah Cole sat by the window, hands folded in his lap, his worn leather briefcase beside him like a faithful companion. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting gold across acres of pine, dirt roads, and rusted mailboxes. The world passed in silence, and for the first time in weeks, Isaiah allowed himself to breathe. There were no cameras here, no courthouse, no uniforms, just the steady hum of forward motion and the memory of a moment that had shifted more than a courtroom. It had shifted a nation's sense of sight. He had come to testify. That was all. He hadn't planned to go viral. He hadn't rehearsed words for the internet. The line people quoted over and over. "I didn't ask to be seen as a general. I asked to be seen as a man," had come not from a place of poetry, but from exhaustion. From decades of being told he had to prove his humanity before anyone would listen to his voice. And yet, somehow, those words had rippled outward like a quiet storm. Isaiah stared out at the fields, watching a group of children running through rows of tall grass beside a weathered barn. He smiled faintly. That, he thought, was the world he wanted to protect. Not the boardrooms, not the parades, but children running free, unburdened by the weight he had carried for so long. The seat across from him was empty, but his thoughts were full. Images flickered behind his eyes, not of combat zones or medals, but of simpler days. His mother, humming hymns while cooking cornbread. His father's hands, rough but gentle, guiding him through his first lesson on dignity. "Son, no one has to know your worth, so long as you don't forget it." He remembered walking into West Point for the first time. The stairs, the lowered voices, the pressure to be perfect, not just for himself, but for every black cadet who would come after. He remembered the nights he'd stayed up, writing letters to the families of fallen soldiers, white, Black, Latino, because death made no distinction, even when the living did. And he remembered Malik, young, hot-headed, brilliant, a soldier who could lead men one day, if only someone believed in him long enough to give him the chance. That's why he'd come, not to fix the world, just to hold the door open for one more person before it closed. As the train slowed through a small town, the conductor entered the car. With a polite nod, he glanced down at Isaiah's ticket. "You, General Cole?" Isaiah blinked in surprise. "Not anymore. Just Mr. Cole." The conductor grinned, clearly trying to hold back excitement. "Well, sir, we've had about 5 passengers ask if you were on board. Thought I'd check before the whole train starts coming through to shake your hand." Isaiah chuckled, the first sound of laughter he'd allowed in days. "Tell them I appreciate the respect, but I'm just heading home." The conductor paused, then leaned in slightly. "Sir, I saw that video. I played it for my sons. One of them wants to join the army now, but not to carry a gun. He said he wants to carry himself the way you do." Isaiah's eyes softened. "Then he's already ahead of the game," he replied. The train picked up speed again, and Isaiah leaned his head back, watching the blur of trees return. He thought about the silence, not just the silence in the hallway where no one had spoken up, but the silence he had carried his entire career, the way he bit back emotion in the face of disrespect, the way he chose measured speech over justified anger, the way he had learned that dignity didn't shout, it endured. There had been so many moments he could have erupted, so many names he could have exposed, so many wrongs he could have punished, but he had chosen restraint, and somehow, that restraint had shaken more ground than any outburst ever could. He wasn't naive. He knew one speech wouldn't dismantle systemic bias. One viral moment wouldn't erase decades of inequity. But it had done something. It had interrupted the comfortable rhythms of assumption, interrupted the routine of silence, interrupted the reflex of fear when someone sees skin before soul. And in that interruption came space for something else: awareness, accountability, and, just maybe, change. When Isaiah arrived at his modest house just outside Fort Benning, the porch light was already on. A neighbor had left a pie, covered in foil, with a note that read, "Thank you for showing us how to stand tall." He stepped inside, placed the briefcase by the coat rack, and moved to his desk. There, among the unopened mail, was a single envelope marked from the Department of Education. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter informing him that his testimony had been approved for national inclusion in the U.S. High School Civic Studies curriculum under the section Modern Ethics and Moral Leadership. No names, no dramatization, just facts. And one sentence quoted word for word. He reminded the nation that recognition is not owed by rank, but by respect. Isaiah folded the letter, slid it into a drawer, and turned off the light. Later that night, as he sat on the porch with a cup of tea, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. A radio played a gospel tune. Isaiah looked up at the stars. He didn't need the world to remember his name. He just needed it to remember the moment. That moment when one man, calm, unarmed, unbending, stood in a hallway, wrongly accused, and didn't retaliate, but revealed the truth. Not with rage, but with presence. Because sometimes, the greatest resistance isn't loud, it's still, It's composed. It's the kind of quiet that can't be ignored anymore. And that night, in the soft darkness of Georgia, Isaiah Cole sat in peace, not because the battle was over, but because he had refused to disappear. Years passed. The story of what happened in that courthouse faded from the headlines, as all stories eventually do. The video was no longer trending. The news cycle had moved on, but in classrooms, in lecture halls, and inside the quiet hearts of those who had witnessed something more than a confrontation, it never truly disappeared. At Greenwood County Courthouse, a new plaque was installed outside courtroom C. It bore no images, no grand words, just a simple engraving. Dignity does not require rank to be recognized. It simply refuses to be erased. There was no ceremony. That was how Isaiah would have wanted it. Across the country, the quote appeared in places big and small, painted above chalkboards in inner-city schools, stitched into banners at veteran halls, scribbled onto notepads in university lecture rooms. It wasn't his title that people remembered. It was the moment he stood handcuffed in silence, not to prove anything, but to remind everyone watching what restraint, presence, and moral clarity truly looked like. Isaiah Cole never returned to the courthouse. He never gave another interview. But his actions had seeded something lasting. Officer Rachel Whitmore, once humiliated and suspended, later requested to speak at community police workshops. In a quiet, gravelly voice, she told her story not as a cautionary tale about disobedience, but about humility. "I saw a type," she told them, "when I should have seen a human being." Her life had shifted because someone had shown her what dignity looked like when power said it didn't exist. Back at Fort Benning, Isaiah continued to mentor young officers, never on stage, never on camera, just quietly, deliberately, one conversation at a time. And every now and then, when asked why he had chosen not to fight back that day in the hallway, he would simply smile and say, "Because I wasn't there to win. I was there to be seen." In the end, Isaiah Cole didn't leave behind monuments. He left behind mirrors. Mirrors that made people ask hard questions. What do I see when I look at someone different from me? Do I pause long enough to see the truth beneath the surface? Am I choosing silence? When someone needs me to speak, those were the questions that mattered. And they lingered long after Isaiah Cole had stepped away from the spotlight he never asked for. Because true legacy isn't loud. It doesn't demand applause. It simply stands and lets the world remember what it looks like to walk with honor when no one else will. In a world that moves faster than ever, where headlines shift by the hour and opinions fly louder than truth, it's easy to feel lost. Easy to believe that kindness is outdated, that stillness means weakness, and that being loud is the only way to be heard. But life, at its core, hasn't changed. People still long to be seen, not for what they do, but for who they are. We still ache for connection, for fairness, for the kind of respect that doesn't need to be earned with credentials or shouted to be understood. Today, more than ever, your presence matters. The way you show up for others, silently or boldly, makes a difference. Your decision to speak gently when anger is easier, to listen longer when judgment tempts, to act with dignity even when unseen, that's the kind of power this world forgets to celebrate. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to choose what's right when it's hardest. Because in the end, life isn't about how much noise you make. It's about the peace you leave behind when you walk away. Stay kind, Stay thoughtful and keep choosing humanity even when the world doesn't.